Hey friends, welcome back to Artist of the Way. I am John, and today I am not joined by Nate. Unfortunately, he had something come up, so he is not here, but I am joined by an old friend of the podcast, John Taylor, who was on like our third episode, I think. John is a very good friend of mine. He has a master's of theology from Dallas Theological Seminary and has been working as a pastor bivocationally for the last few years, and it's been a couple of years since we've had him on, so I was like, let's get you back on, John. Today we are talking about the medieval church and art. So we're talking about how was art used in the medieval church? Why was it important to people in that time because of the way the church functioned, the lack of literacy in that day and age, and then also just the church's relationship to art then, and how maybe we can learn some things for today from it. I had a really great time talking with John. It's a really great conversation. He just has a wealth of knowledge with theology and with church history. He's just kind of like a walking Wikipedia. So it was really great to pick his brain, and he's got a lot of great insights. So thank you guys for joining us. And without further ado, here's John. But thanks for coming back on. I think it's been 2 years, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Time just flew.
Yeah, sounds about right.
But yes, for anybody who doesn't know you, or for anybody who's like, I heard this guy 2 years ago and I don't remember what he's about, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself, some of your background with the Christian faith, with art, and maybe a little bit of what you've been up to in the last couple of years?
Sure. My name is John Taylor. We're both named John. So
We
if
are.
you hear John, it'll be a useless reference point.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised in a Christian household and here in West Michigan, and grew up going to the same church pretty much my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I went to college, got a degree in what's called Art of Ministry, not related to ministry at all. They just kind of liked the term, so they called it Art of Ministry. Confusingly, at a school that offered Bachelor's of Arts, Art of Ministry was a Bachelor of Science. And
All right.
I know someone who got a science degree from the same school that was a Bachelor of Arts. But I went from there to a seminary down in Texas called Dallas Theological Seminary and studied there for 4 years and graduated from there with a master's in theology. Moved back up to West Michigan, the same church. Started going back to the church I grew up at, which was Calvary. And I was a pastor there for about 2 years as a pastoral resident. Then I moved over to another church, a small little church, and I was a pastor there for about 2.5 years. And I've been a pastor for about half a year at a little church plant.
Yeah.
As for the arts, I've been involved in a number of things. Probably the thing I've been most involved throughout my life is the musical side. I started playing string bass when I was in 5th grade and actively played through college. I haven't played much anymore. I sold my bass, so
I know.
no more bass.
Sad.
I mean, I could probably pick it up if I really tried, but I've done other things. I did plays throughout high school, and maybe once in college, at church in college, and then a little bit afterwards as well. Done a couple random, very little visual art.
Sure.
I've done some poetry, and some very minimal creative writing, but
Sure.
yeah.
Nice. Sweet. Well, thank you for coming on. We're going to chat today about the medieval church and art and kind of the role in that played in that time. It was a very different time. Could you first just kind of set the stage for us? What was the medieval church like, and what were some big differences to how we might think of church today?
Yeah, I mean, so to be clear, if we want to be like strictly on the medieval side, the medieval period, as well as I understand, goes from like, if you want to be super broad, you can probably go from like the fall of the Roman Empire to the start of the Renaissance.
Yeah.
Maybe more specific is somewhere like 1000 AD to the start of the Renaissance. But the medieval church is very different for a number of reasons from the modern church. One, if we start at the 1000 date, you only have two major church groups. You have the Catholic Church that has its headquarters in Rome, and then you have the Orthodox Church that has headquarters in it moved throughout time, but either in Byzantium, in like Constantinople, and then later moved up to like Russia. But these are both very And you have other little churches. You have Coptics and
Yeah.
Egyptian and Ethiopian Orthodox, but those are the main two, right? And they're similar to what you might understand about those churches today, and also different about what you might understand about those churches today. And they progressed over time. One thing we'll talk about later is the Latin Mass and how it relates to this, because it relates to this topic.
Yeah.
And how that was a thing that like started really early on, partly in the Roman Empire where people spoke Latin, so they did a Latin Mass. Yeah. And then it progressed and later on became mandated. But the time it was mandated, we're actually out of the medieval period.
Interesting.
But I was like, this discussion might naturally extend some into the Renaissance just because there's so much art during the Renaissance. But there's plenty of art in the medieval period that is like that. But I don't know if this is quite on this question. A key thing to understand in the medieval church is most people did not regularly read their Bibles. And not because they weren't committed to the faith. It was because they couldn't read.
Right. They didn't regularly read at all.
Yes. They did not regularly read. Most people in the Middle Ages were illiterate. Not because they were in any way less educated than today. I mean, you could say they're less educated today, but it's not why they were illiterate.
They weren't less intelligent.
Yeah, they weren't less intelligent. It just didn't matter. Yeah. If I'm going to be a blacksmith or a farmer and I can remember what I'm making, it doesn't matter if I can read. Who cares? So I could take 5-10 years to learn how to read. And because we haven't had the printing press invented yet, books in the Middle Ages are enormously expensive, right? They're written by hand. We don't have any mass production of paper. So just the paper for a codex or a paper for a book is expensive, very expensive. Yeah. And then you have to have someone, if you want a theological book or a Bible, you have to have someone who's willing to copy by hand the entire Bible, which is a very long and laborious process. So, we obviously had written Bibles. The church has tons of them, and that's where we get numerous manuscripts of the original languages and Latin and other languages. Yeah. But those were normally in monasteries and church settings and other places where that's what they did. That's what a lot of monks did. A lot of their time is they would pray and they would do these things, and then they would spend 2 or 3 hours a day copying scriptures so that they could say, hey, we're opening up a new church in this area. Sweet. We spent 12 months. Here's a Bible. Yeah. But it just didn't matter for most people. They didn't read because they couldn't read. Right.
Okay. So that kind of covers some of the differences. Well, were there significant theological differences? Because of course we had obviously in America we're a lot more Protestant, which didn't exist then, but even the Catholic Church is fairly different now in a lot of
100%.
things. So what were some kind of major theological differences in the air?
It's hard to pin down on anything particular because it's such a long period. Right. It's depending on how you want to count. It's like about half of the life of the church is in the medieval period. Or a quarter, again, depending on how you want to count. Yeah. And it's different area by area. And Orthodox versus Catholic. So, obviously, if you are Protestant today, there's a number of things that are different. Yeah. Theologically. Not at, a super core level, but at, depending on what type of Protestant you are, we have a very high and strong ecclesiology in terms of church hierarchy. Yeah. Depending where you want to put the origin of Pope, Catholics will put the Pope all the way back to St. Peter. Other groups would progress it out onto Gregory the Great's probably the one where you have to say he's now acting as Pope. He's about 500 AD. He's the one who we have definitive proof that he claimed that the Bishop of Rome had primacy over other bishops. Yeah. And he starts acting sort of as a political figure as well. So when we'll use the term barbarian armies were invading Rome, there were political leaders that went to go make a deal with them, and he was one of the political leaders that was chosen to go make a deal with the people that were invading Rome. Was the Bishop of Rome, and that's Gregory the Great. So he's the first he's the latest one you can put the Pope. Earliest would be, people would say, well, Peter was the first Pope, and it goes back to that. Yeah. So obviously we have that very high church structure. For Protestants, one of the key aspects of the Protestant Reformation was this very return to the text, strong text. Again, these people don't have the text.
Right.
I mean, they have the Bible. They just don't have one of their own in their home that they read on their own because they can't read. So the Bible they get from the priest in their local church. So that priority is kind of different. They would agree with Protestants that like the Bible's the Word of God and it contains the teaching of salvation, these sorts of things. But the priority of you have to understand the Bible, you should be reading it regularly for yourself, these sort of things, that didn't exist because people couldn't. And you had the idea that the truth was held in the Word of the Bible, but also held by the church. Yeah. So you kind of had to enter through the door of the church to get the food of the Bible. And then, I mean, what we'll talk about, like, maybe it depends what you want to call a major theological point, but like the divinity of Christ, the Trinity, all these things exist. They believe all these things. Things like, I don't know how detailed we want to get on this, like what type of atonement theory you're going with. Sure. They probably wouldn't articulate it the same way as we do. Even if many of the things they said ended up being similar, they would say it very differently. Right. But the theological differences exist, but are not that distinct from Protestants. Also exist, but aren't that maybe even less distinct for Catholics of today. Right. So in the late medieval period is when we see the introduction of indulgences. Indulgences are the main spurring point for the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther complained about a lot of stuff, but like his big thing is like, we shouldn't be, this doesn't make any sense. We can't be selling forgiveness of sins. So that becomes a thing, and that's Catholics today don't use indulgences. That's not a practice taught by the church. And again, it depends where you have. There's the Council of Orange where they kind of change some like understanding of, are humans inherently sinful in these things that the church took for a little time, but then has reverted back on and things like that. And then there was a counter-Reformation period where after the Reformation, the church does two things. They kind of double down on some things that are different from the Protestants. Then they sneakily kind of put in some things that like agree with the Protestants.
Oh, but that is kind of a good point.
Yeah. So like one again, because the Protestants had such a high understanding of the text and they were like, people should read it for themselves. One of the big Protestant things was getting the Bible translated ideally from the original text into the language of the people. Yeah. So Martin Luther did this himself. One of his big projects after the Protestant Reformation happened, and he's like, not you, Catholic Church. I'm going to do my own thing. He gathered, again, this is 500 years ago, what Greek and Hebrew manuscripts he could, and wrote translated a German version of the Bible. Yeah. So they could disseminate it. Nice. And say, hey, Germans, you can read the text for yourself. You don't need to go to a priest. Yeah. Not that they took down church structures. If anyone's been to a Lutheran church, if you're very
big on preserving.
If you're big, if you're really a Protestant, like a strong evangelical, like Baptist, you will think a Lutheran church is a Catholic church. So he really didn't go away from a lot of that structure. But in many ways, it was very different because these things are happening. So yeah, and there's even like a counter. So that's called the Counter Reformation of the Catholic Church, but they like double down on some things and then do change some things. Yeah, like Luther said, we shouldn't have indulgences, and the Catholic Church was like, no, we can have indulgences. And within like 100 years, they don't do indulgences anymore. Yeah. But yeah, by then we're getting out of the medieval period. The Protestant Reformation happened about 100 years into the Renaissance. So,
but no, that sets up some I think good distinctives. So obviously the literacy
is a huge
thing. That's a big thing. Sounds like the authority of the church generally, like that, they would tend to have probably more say than we would think they would have today in people's lives,
especially for Protestants. Yeah. Well, and maybe this is different too. Because the church, especially in Europe, is so pervasive and so powerful. Yeah. That being put out of the church, if you're excommunicated, is essentially being put out of the culture. Yeah. Right? Whereas today, we have what we might be able to call a more tolerant society or multi-religious society.
We're just kind of more siloed. Like, it's like you can dip into the different pockets, like you've dipped into a theater pocket sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's not become a culture. And like, even though I'm so in the theater world, like I could dip out of that and still have a life.
Yeah.
I could likewise, I think today you can pull out of the church, whereas then it was Christendom. It was more controlling of the culture.
If today I chose to become Jewish or Muslim, that would not affect my living situation.
Right.
But, like, I wouldn't have to move. Back in the Middle Ages, if you became a Muslim and you were living in Central France, you need to move to the Middle East. There's no infrastructure. There's no mosques in France.
Yep.
And there's no societal acceptance of that thing.
Right.
So, like, that is a big difference, too, is if you leave the church, you leave the culture in the Middle Age. Yeah.
So I think then we've got a very interesting setup with the literacy issue and then the sort of authority and thus responsibility of the church to be like, okay, we've really got to come alongside our people and help walk them through like a common life together, a common Christian life, and educate them. So, of course, art was a big piece of that. Can you just sort of lay out a bird's eye view of what kind of art was used for that and how was it used?
Yeah, I mean, art's so broad. But
Right.
I'm going to point to two primary pieces of art that are essential to the life of the Christian in the Middle Ages and the understanding of the faith, which are visual mediums, particularly paintings and sculptures.
Yep.
Christians did a lot of visual medium, but paintings, sculptures are going to be the big ones.
Yep.
And then the other one's music.
Yes.
Just because singing in church is not a modern invention.
Right.
There has never been a period of the church that did not include singing as part of the service. I'm sure there are some random Christian denominations out there that are like, no.
Right.
But like the church as a history as a whole,
church history,
is from the time of Acts to now. Every church everywhere, again, minor exceptions probably exist,
right?
But every church everywhere has sung as a part of the service. And that becomes, we actually know, this may be a counterexample, and this is pre-Middle Ages, but Arius, who was a heretic, part of the way he spread his heresy was were Arian songs that Arians had made.
Interesting.
So when they were going into churches and churches were having their own internal debates, if your worship pastor was an Arian, he would like slip in Arian songs into your worship that taught Arian theology.
Interesting.
And this is, for the Middle Ages, very valuable because, again, we have largely literate people. But they can all speak, right?
Yeah. Right.
People were deaf at some point. Some people can speak.
Sure.
They can all speak.
Yeah.
And because they can all speak, most of them can sing. How well? Topic for debate. But they can all probably sing, and therefore, music is inherently, has been understood throughout history and very well proven scientifically in the last 100 years. Children learn better through music than they learn through speech because the pairing of words with rhythm, with sound, with repetition is inherently easier to remember than just being talked at or a lecture, right? So it's still true today in many ways that your songs in church are often as instructive, if not more instructive, than the sermon.
Yeah.
It's not to badmouth sermons. Sermons have a good value because they can go much deeper typically, and they can dive in more specifically. But oftentimes, especially for children, and we'll probably circle back around on children later, they often learn more from the songs because it's the thing they remember. It
involves you more.
And it involves
you
you
a bit
more.
more integrated with head and heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I am much more likely to come back and revisit on a Tuesday a song that was in the sermon than I am to like actually go back and read my sermon notes. I might do that, but I'm much more likely to be like, what was that song? Oh yeah, that's right. And re-listen to the song. So music's big, and visual mediums. I mean, anyone who has been to or seen any Catholic church, especially a medieval age Catholic church or a Renaissance age Catholic church, will understand that was a hugely dominant, hugely important thing in the church. So again, other art forms existed and were useful, but those two are the ones that will dominate and be most useful to this discussion.
Sure. What was different about the church's relationship to art in that time? It's more present in the worship spaces. They're using it a lot. I mean, obviously music we've continued to use, but visual art, that's sort of dropped off.
Yeah. Well, and that's again where we split into who are we looking at.
Right.
Because let's split this into 3 groups. The Orthodox Church essentially has not seen a drop.
Right.
Anyone who's listening or watching and has not been to an Orthodox church, they're basically floor to ceiling art. And not like abstract art, not like no, they are like sculptures, paintings everywhere. Like you'll see Orthodox churches that have a window that's this big, and in that window is a picture of Jesus.
Yeah.
So them, it's high. The Catholic Church has kind of varied throughout time, but largely still stayed very prevalent with art and supporting the arts. If you look at this, again, we'll get to the Renaissance here, but Middle Ages too. If you look at the Renaissance, the majority of Renaissance arts you see, like the vast majority of them, are a religious in nature and commissioned by the church. Right? If you think of these, like the Sistine Chapel and the Last Supper, these are obviously religious, but they are not just like these guys taking religious themes and doing them by their own.
Right.
They are paid for by the church for the church. So the Catholic Church at that time, and the Counter-Reformation actually did this even more, because this will be our next topic, was Protestants. Some Protestants kind of eschewed art. And one of the things the Catholics double down on is like, oh, Protestants don't want art, then we want even more art. Yeah. So the late Middle Ages kind of go maybe 200, 300 years before the Renaissance starts. The Catholic Church starts to like not get rid of art or delay it, but like put a little less of a priority on it. Right. Maybe in some sense because they already had so much. Right. But
we have a backlog.
They didn't like prioritize it like they had at certain periods of the church. And again, it was expensive, all these things. Right. But the Counter-Reformation comes out and they're like, no, it's the perfect time to, right? It's the middle of the Renaissance. So we have all these artists who are willing to do it and they're like, all right, we're going to have even better art, more art. Protestants kind of split into two camps initially, and then have kind of woven together throughout time. Your Lutherans and your Anglicans tended to kind of stick with the art. There were some Lutheran people who like kind of got mad about art for a little bit, but then kind of got back onto it. So Lutherans as a whole and Germany as a whole didn't really do away with art. They maybe weren't as focused on it as like the Catholic or the Orthodox Church, but they kept a bunch of their art and continued to make religious art. And again, most Lutheran churches that you go in today, most Anglican churches you'll go in today have, we'll say, at least some art. And at least some art not just around like in the sanctuary, in the places of worship. The ones that really got into it were the more, what we'd call obviously they're all reformers, but we would call today reform, which are your Calvinists and your Zwinglians. So that's in France, that's in Switzerland. They got into essentially destroying church art that was there in a number of ways. They would actually just tear some up and burn it and chisel apart sculptures and stuff. They did at some point a thing, basically literally defacing art, where if an art had a face on it, you can find pictures of this very easily online. They would literally just like scratch off the faces. But even they very few groups fully got away from art. I actually read an article about this where they said the one thing, even for your really extreme art people, Protestants who were really against it, because they held such a high view of the Bible, if you had a painting of a saint who was holding a Bible, they would tend to leave it alone. Or they would do the defacing thing, but not the full piece. They wouldn't like tear it apart. So like historically in church tradition, a lot of the saints, especially the early saints, the like apostles and them, have like specific symbols. So like Peter, because he's given the keys to the kingdom, he's normally depicted with a literal physical set of keys. So like Luke and Paul, who wrote large sections of the New Testament, are typically depicted holding Bibles. So a lot of pictures of them got saved because the Protestants had such a high priority on the scriptures that they didn't even want to break.
That's so interesting.
A picture of the scriptures.
That's so interesting.
But they were willing to break other scripture paintings and stuff. Yeah.
That could be a totally different. That.
Yeah.
I almost want to rabbit trail down there. But
Maybe I'll find that article and send it to you.
I want to read that.
Where they were destroying art, but if it had a Bible in it, they were much more reluctant to damage it.
That's just so, the philosophy and like the thought process of that is like just so intriguing.
And then that goes on, right? We talked about there's no Protestant church or evangelical churches in the Middle Ages.
Right.
What we would call them evangelical.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps people say that it was evangelical. We just never term.
Right.
Yeah, but that's not what we're going to talk about now.
Yeah.
But we've shifted over time to where Lutherans and Anglicans, again, have kind of stayed that course that they have, that they're kind of don't have the priority of art that perhaps the Orthodox or the Catholics do, but they have no problem with art. Mm-hmm. The more, we'll say, evangelical Reformed branches of the church have kind of, because they inherently have, most of them, less strong ecclesiology and less strong like hierarchy, especially if we look at our like non-denom churches, independent churches, independent Baptists, because they're essentially independent bodies. It just kind of depends on
on the church,
right? I'm willing to say, for the most part, most large denominations have at least an acceptance of art. The only churches generally, I'm sure there's some denomination out there that defies me on that, but the most churches that have like an actual dislike getting rid of art are primarily going to be like independent churches or non-denom churches, and probably not that many non-denom churches even. Yeah.
Do you think some of the lack of art in modern evangelical churches comes down to just we haven't inherited that in our tradition?
I mean, of course. Yeah. Like I said, the Catholic Church not only has a priority to make art, they also have 1,000 years of art, right? That no one made the Last Supper yesterday.
Right.
It was made 500 years ago. No one made La Pieta. These things, all these sculptures, pictures of Jesus. The Catholic Church has literally like the actual physical originals of pictures, or in the Orthodox have this as well probably, of paintings, of sculptures that are from 400 AD, 300 AD. So they have the actual history and have it. Yeah. And because they're coming out of a history that not only accepts art, but finances art, and is the patron, is a good art word, of these arts. Of course they have a stronger view of these things. I'll back up maybe a little bit and say, the reason Protestants, there's kind of two reasons Protestants do this, is one, some of them just react to anything the Catholic Church likes. So the Catholic Church likes it, we don't like it. Yeah. But again, because we have this the Protestants have this really strong view of the scriptures, they go back and read the scriptures, and the big thing that lands on is the second commandment, where it says, hey, make no images of other things. And people say, hey, this seems like images. Right. It seems like, whether or not these Protestants are right or wrong, it seems like these people are involving these images as either a part of worship or an object of worship. Yeah. And that's what they're trying to get away from. So I think that part is actually understandable and maybe even honorable that they're trying to do this. I think some of them misunderstand. I mean, in many cases that might be true. Right. In individual Catholic bodies and stuff. I think in many cases these guys are misunderstanding and overreacting to what is actually happening. And as Protestants, because we inherit this, I mean, you and I are a little different because you're an Anglican where you have that background, and I'm now
I am.
You are now,
but growing up, Nazarene evangelical, bent. So
so in our more Reformed evangelicals, just because 500 years of history is a long time, right? Where most of those churches throughout history had, again, very minimal art. Even if there's an acceptance of art, hardly ever have they been like a patron of the arts. Right. So they don't tend to have a high priority on it or that inventory of it that other churches, the Catholic churches, Lutheran churches, the Orthodox churches will have, just because they've been accepting longer, because they've been patroning longer, they just have more. Right.
I have a curveball question to throw at you. Yeah. Protestant churches have been being patrons of a bit more art now, or trying to dip into that. Yeah. But a lot of times, I don't think we often find that the art is as rich as art historically. And so now I'm just curious, part of that is genre. We've been looking at what's the art of the day. Let's get into film and story and music. Yeah. Of course, we've always had music, but is there something do you think it's just easier to portray scriptural concept, in a visual medium like a painting or something like a song? Or do you think there was something different the approach to it?
I'll put songs aside because songs is I'll put music aside because the one thing that all the churches have always had, like I said,
right.
Is music. So,
and some great and some terrible.
As the Zwinglians are destroying these art pieces, they have songs in their worship, right? And they're creating songs, and we do have a 500-year registry of Protestant music,
right?
That is good, and I think that there's plenty of good, there's plenty of bad. That's true of all art, but we have plenty of that. So I'll put music aside, and say the visual art. I think there can be two problems, not two problems, but two thoughts.
Yeah.
Because there's a more modern move to go back to it, people don't have as much of the emphasis, this is going to sound weird, just on art as beauty and not as like a strict evangelism tool. So if you're trying to do too much with your art in terms of, have I put every element of the gospel into this painting? You're probably, in many cases, forcing some things that is going to detract from the whole. Yeah. Like, every portrait of St. Peter in the Catholic Church Orthodox history is not meant to be a conclusive teaching of all of his, of all 1st and 2nd Peter and Acts. Yeah. It's just meant to be a representation of him, and we'll get on this later, that spurs conversation and talks about these things, and is in itself excellent and beautiful, has its own quality. I think with Protestant art, we have a couple things where I think a lot of it is very good.
Yes, absolutely.
But because we don't have a higher church structure, it tends to just say insulated in
wherever
it came from, right? If I have a really good artist in my church and he makes art for my church,
that stays in the local context.
Yeah. The odds of this getting brought up the chain and copied and brought and disseminated is much lower than in the Catholic Church. If I have a very good artist and it's very beautiful, I go, hey, if I'm the priest, I go, hey, this is good. Let me show it to the bishop. And the bishop says, you're right. This is good. Let me show the cardinal. And now we
have the Sistine Chapel.
Now we take that and we can make copies and we can disseminate it to numerous churches because we have that infrastructure. Yeah. So the Protestants just don't have that infrastructure to, again, low church Protestants don't have the infrastructure to spread this out very broadly.
Yeah.
And there's maybe some sense now where there's maybe less need because we have enough good art throughout art history and of our own that I don't need to look as far to another Protestant church to find good art, because I have all this church from art history, and if I have a good artist or multiple good artists in my church or in my church community, if that includes some other local churches.
When we have the most access to art that we've ever had.
Absolutely.
With the internet. Yeah.
With the internet and with, all the different sharing options I don't have to try to recreate an art by hand. Right. If I like a picture, I just snap a picture of it and now I can send that to
great. I don't have to try and match Rembrandt's skill.
Yeah.
I can just show them Rembrandt.
And and there's just a reality that for a myriad of reasons, the Renaissance in particular developed these once in multiple generation talents that just make art that I'm not going to say nobody can make, but that was being made at the period at such a rate that it's hard to duplicate across other time periods.
And many that were like defining for their medium.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Another little just interesting thing to zoom in on too, as we think about how art was commissioned. If we, going back to the authority piece, we live in an era where the church isn't the dominant force in the culture, whereas then it was.
Yeah.
So for a lot of artists, regardless of maybe how strongly you held to your faith, how important a piece it was to you, some of the best way to get work is to do it for the church. I mean, and so then all of the best artists are lining up. Whereas today, we have insulated it into, I may be a Christian artist, and so, depending on how I view that, I'm one that does it for the church, which doesn't mean I'm a worse artist. Yeah. But it narrows our pool. Yeah. And so the percentage of good to bad art will be different just because of the numbers you have.
And we have Renaissance painters and painters in the Middle Ages who we can look at maybe their life and say, I don't know how strong
Right.
their faith actually was. But yeah, the church was where a lot of money was. The church is where the opportunities were. So you worked with the church and you worked with other artists. Now, like you said, we have the internet. If you're a really good artist,
Right.
in many cases today, especially in a low church Protestant setting, choosing to work as an artist primarily for the church is probably a pay cut.
Yeah.
Rather than a safe paycheck. Whereas back in the day, it was the opposite, right? Being we'll say a rogue artist or artist on your own is kind of the radical lifestyle where you're doing it for the love of the art and not the money. Whereas being with the church, that was secure, that was stable. You would have patronage. Now it's kind of flipped where, and this gets into the church back then, even the Catholic Church compared to today, had so much money.
Yeah.
That they could commission they could commission a guy to work on one painting for a year. And they could support him while he did that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know how long the Sistine Chapel took, but I think that took multiple years. So it's one artist working constantly for multiple years. Most churches today just don't have that money. Even the Catholic Church is, I mean, as a whole, they do. But individual bodies.
Right.
They just don't have the money.
Do that,
They don't have the money to pay a guy to make a painting for a year.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. Interesting. So let's circle back into the medieval period and how we're using these in the life of a Christian.
Yeah.
What are the most important elements to these pieces of art? What do you want to achieve with these pieces of art as a church for your community?
Yeah, the biggest thing, right, is the art gets to tell a story in both its actual things and the conversation it creates.
Yeah.
So let's go to an art piece. We'll say, I can't think of the actual name, but there's a very well-known art piece of Abraham sacrificing Isaac. And if you are a literate Christian who doesn't have your Bible, and you have not been told this story by your priest, because it hasn't come up in the readings,
right?
You don't know what this is, unless your father knew the Bible well and told you Bible stories,
right?
You don't know what this is. So now you get this opportunity in all these different art pieces to talk about what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, who is this guy? Why is he about to kill this dude? Why is there an angel here?
Yeah.
And this becomes an avenue for priests, bishops, other spiritual leaders to tell these stories, to have conversations about things that are going on in the Bible that the people just didn't know about, right? It also gives you, and this is maybe where visual medium, it does something that even reading the scriptures can't do, which is it helps you explore. Music might have this also, but visual medium does for sure. Helps you explore what are kind of the unwritten factors in the scriptures in terms of emotions, conditions, and all these,
Yeah.
How do I, if I'm a painter, how do I paint Abraham as he's going to slay Isaac? Is he angry? Is he sad? Is he determined? And I can express all these things differently in a painting with how I do the body posture and how I do the face and all these things that scripture doesn't tell us. And therefore, in some sense, we can't really say definitively because scripture doesn't tell us.
I was going to say there's like a devil's ad or a counterpoint there.
Yeah.
Well, but could you be misrepresenting that story?
And I think yes, but also this is where we come into the conversation about it. Is let's say I paint Abraham as sad as he goes to kill. This is now an interpretation of the text, but it's one I get to talk about where I'm thinking about, hey, in this scenario, what would you be feeling like? What would you do? And you get to kind of, in some ways, make application of the text through the painting to say, this artist chose to display him as sad. Do you think that's accurate? How would you have done this?
So then again, the art becomes just a piece in the greater whole. Kind of like we were just talking about with the modern art piece. We don't want the piece of art to do everything. Yeah. The piece of art is meant to open a door and be a part of this integrated faith storytelling.
Yes. Yeah. It's part of the instruction. It's not the whole instruction. Yeah. Which is why we still have the church meeting. If it was that easy, you could just have you could have a gallery,
and you just go sit
and
in
you
the
would
gallery
walk through the gallery, and that's what you would do every Sunday.
And if you want in the center, here's the communion.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So these things were designed to work together.
Yeah.
And we'll pivot from that. We have two things. We have the instructional element of, I've never heard this story, whether it's a painting of a story or just a painting of like an apostle or Jesus himself. And we get to say, who is this guy? Who is this guy? Well, this is Barnabas, and this is what we know about him. And these are two things. There's that. And art, particularly good art, gets us the idea of just thinking about, hey, what is excellent and beautiful? And why does that matter? And the church can say, or the priest can say, the person can say, hey, we appreciate this beautiful thing because God is beautiful. God is really the source of all beauty.
Yeah.
So when we look at these things that do this in some way, even though it's not directly a picture of God, helps us understand by understanding better what the broader confines of beauty are, we understand God and what glorifies him in the effort, in the excellence, in the beauty of these paintings and of these sculptures.
Yeah. That's good. My brain went two different directions. Hang on. You got to pull it together. Are there works where you would guess... Now I'm getting your opinion on it. But again, I feel like we're in a dance in this conversation. And kind of with all history, when we're looking back, of like, how is it then and how is it now? And are there things we want to take from that or leave from that?
Yeah.
Are there ways that could be done badly? I mean, obviously there are, but what are some ways it could be done badly? Or are there like stories or things that you would think, maybe this is something that is not useful to put into this kind of artistic medium?
Yeah, I mean... Obviously, things can be done badly. I'm going to circle back to that in a second.
Yeah.
As to stories that might not work, I think your biggest difficulty is going to be anything directly involving God the Father, God the Holy Spirit, and not Jesus.
Right.
Because these two are spirits. So anytime we have to portray them, we have to visibly.
Right.
We're portraying these visible beings inherently in a visible way.
Right.
And
we're
whether we do that,
choice about
whether we do that as a man or as a wind or as a light, we're making choices. Jesus is easier because Jesus was a man, or Jesus is a man, and therefore, when I portray him as a human, I still have to choose what's his hair color, what's his eye color, how his height. But those are more incidental.
Those are smaller leaps.
Than the fact that he is a man. Right. So when I portray Jesus in a painting, whether he's with other people or on his own as a man, that's correct. Jesus is a human being. So that portrayal is not a big leap.
Probably why we see the Holy Spirit as a dove so many times.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we know it was at one point.
Yeah.
For at least a moment.
Yeah, at least a moment it was portrayed as a dove.
Yeah.
So we can use a dove.
Yeah.
God is light. So that's why we get light a lot. Because... And then we have to say... So I think that's where it gets a little harder, but not necessarily impossible. Because we can say, hey... We have in Scripture through word pictures where it says the hand of God, and we don't get this in English. The nose of God comes a lot up in Hebrew.
Sure.
And these other things that are anthropomorphizing God. So there's an argument to be said, well, can we do this for the purpose of representation?
Yeah.
In a thing. Other than that, I think there might be stories that are more difficult to portray, but I don't know that there's any that will like... Offhand, I don't know that there are anywhere like portraying this will inherently make it harder to instruct. Yeah. Back to your question sort of about, is there a way to do it badly? Right. Of course there is. Yeah. You just have to do it badly. We tend to see, I think this is true of all art. People tend to look back in history and say, art back then was better. Yeah. It wasn't better. Just the good stuff is what I have a phrase to tell people in which to say, most art, actually pretty much all art, is not good because it's old. It's old because it's good. Yeah. And what I mean by that is we don't hold on to the bad stuff. There's a well-known, this is past medieval, there's a well-known Protestant named John Wesley. Yeah. He had a brother whose name was Charles Wesley. Okay. And Charles Wesley was a songwriter, and he worked with kind of a group of songwriters. And there was a period, I want to say for like 2 years, where John Wesley did this like evangelical meeting at their church before he became an itinerant preacher, before he traveled and talked to people, where they had a meeting at the church, and one of the polls was, there's a new worship song every night. And they did this for like 2 years. Wow. So this small group of songwriters, every day would make a new song.
Wow.
We, in the modern day churches, sing like 4 Charles Wesley songs, right? And he did this for 2 years. So he wrote like 700 songs.
Yeah.
The reason we only sing 4 is because there's only 4 that are really very good.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the rest of them, I'm sure we're fun to sing and I'm sure we're good, but just weren't that good.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason we think old art is good is because we've already sifted out the bad stuff.
Right.
The stuff we're getting right now, we haven't sifted out the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we end up seeing, well, this song's just not as good as other stuff. Yeah. And in 100 years, they won't sing it.
Right.
Right? There's going to be a few songs from this generation, like there's been from every generation, that hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have, I think, the oldest songs, I don't actually know which one of these is older, that see regular singing, I think in every branch of the church, are the Doxology and Be Thou My Vision. Those are both incredibly old.
Mm-hmm.
We don't sing like any other songs from 400 AD because just as church history has gone on, we have to start translating songs, which is very difficult.
Right.
And we just go, well, there's better stuff that's come out, or this stuff isn't as good as we thought, or resonates. So
I find that interesting too, because it almost takes the pressure off. You don't have to make a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Because if you're bad, you're not going to destroy the church.
You're not. And this is, I think, going back to visual medium, the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Of course, everything we still have from 800 AD is good. Mm-hmm. That's why we kept it.
Right.
I'm sure there were dozens, hundreds of artists of whom we have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'll get back to this. I know it would come eventually. In The Great Divorce, it's a C.S. Lewis book where these guys kind of go to heaven and talk about stuff. There's a conversation between 2 guys who were artists. Mm-hmm. And at one point, there's a guy who is a heavenly spirit and a guy who's, we'll call a hellish spirit. He's been dwelling in hell. And the heavenly spirit says, oh, nobody looks at any of our stuff anymore. And the other guy's very worried about it. And the heavenly spirit's not that worried. But that's the reality, right? There have been, throughout history, millions of artists, millions of songwriters. And most of those we have no record of. Mm-hmm. Because even if people liked their stuff at the time, throughout the lens of history, people went, oh, this isn't good enough. Mm-hmm. It's not good enough to bear up against thousands of years of art. Yeah. Because you have to curate eventually. Mm-hmm. And eventually you say, well, this one's better than this one, so we keep this one and get rid of that one.
But then in the local context, what they did still mattered.
100%.
Cool.
Yeah. But we'll circle that. We'll talk about art in the local context later. I'm putting that on your docket if it's not going to come up naturally.
I mean, we could jump to it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think this is a personal thought, without much backing. Well, some backing. If you're a church, particularly a Protestant church who has this thing, who has less of the history, like we talked about, and you want art in your church, and I'm talking visual art here particularly, though I'll include songs in this. Mm-hmm. I think the ideal, if it's possible, is to get that art from your local church. Yeah. If you have an artist in your church, and again, you still want excellent things in the church and beautiful things. So if this artist says they're an artist, but they're really bad, at some point you just got to not hang that thing. Right. But like, so I went to a church that was very large, and amongst them, there were very good musicians and songwriters. Yeah. And we would occasionally write our own music. Nice. And it was very nice because it would go along with sermon series. Mm-hmm. So we had a sermon series in, I don't know, a book, maybe Ephesians, called Life Together. Nice. And we had a worship song written by artists at our church called Life Together. Yeah. And it's about how we do church, basically. Mm-hmm. And we had a song specifically about that. We had a sermon series on the book of John. There were some artists at the church who wrote a piece on from what we were talking about in John, and we sung it in congregational worship. Yeah. So I think the ideal is to find artists in your church and at least give them the opportunity to make art for your church, because the teaching of the New Testament is that we have spiritual gifts given to people, and their primary use is for use in the local church. Yeah. Whether they're evangelistic or building up within the church or anything, their primary avenue they come through is not global speaking positions. It's not book writing. Even if that happens, the primary use is still the local church. So that is my thought on local art, if you will, is if you want art, visual art, musical art in your church, I would encourage people check in your church, not just not like your church body, not church history. That stuff's good. I'm not going to shoot it. But check, is there an artist in your body who'd be willing to try to make an art piece for you, for your body? Yeah.
No, I love that. I'd been thinking when we were talking about how you can't just pull a Rembrandt and you don't need somebody to make a Rembrandt for you. Yeah. There is a great opportunity the church has to be integrated more in their community and in their artistic community by giving those opportunities. Maybe by giving an opportunity to somebody to say, hey, I would like a version of the prodigal son returning. And I could just pull Rembrandts and put it on the screen, but I'd like to see you do it. Yeah. Then they get that opportunity to try and hone their skills.
100%.
And then they have a place in the church. Yeah. The church needs to facilitate a place for the gifts to be used in the church if they're to be used in the church.
100%. Yeah. The larger church I went to, I worked at larger churches and smaller churches. Yeah. One of the benefits of larger churches is they just get to do more stuff. Yeah. Larger church I went to has regularly had almost like a church art gallery. And it normally goes about a month into a sermon series. Once we get the major themes of this sermon series and what we've been talking about in the sermon series, we'll put out a call for kind of any artist in the church to be like, hey, if you want to make some art, do it. And about 2 months later, they'll collect a bunch of it and then display it and be like, hey, this is art people made, whether that's a photography medium or a painting or a sculpture and all these sorts of things. And I know of at least one where there was a painting, I think it was of Israelites crossing the Red Sea. That someone in our church had made. And I think they ended up, 2 or more staff members kind of started a bidding war over this piece of art. And I know who got it. It's still hanging in his office at the church. And someone in the church made this. And it's a part of now his art in his office.
That's really cool. Yeah. Do you think, I'll probably ask this and then start to draw us towards a close. So, of course, we've been talking about, Protestant versus Catholic and Eastern Orthodox in terms of their art and what those worship spaces look like. You and I both grew up in that evangelical context, and I know a lot of our listeners are in that context. And if, as we've been talking about, the stereotype for those congregations are it's a pretty bare building, and there's a wooden cross, and maybe you've got some drapes or some colored lights. Do you think that those churches should spend some time and effort thinking about and potentially putting more beauty and art into those worship spaces? Do you think that's a should, or do you think that's an option?
I think it's at the very least an option. Right. I will probably lean towards a should. And you can do this perhaps progressively in the terms of, so the church I go to now, we use another church building, but they have kind of, I don't know if they're almost stickers on the window of stained glass. They're not actual stained glass, but they kind of look like stained glass. But these are fully abstract stained glass. They're not portraying any biblical events or culture or people or anything like this. They're just kind of a stained glass mosaic. Yeah. And in many ways, I think that's better in some sense than a plain window. Right. And then we get into these things, and what might be right for your church in the context of the people you have in it, and the either issues of unity or disunity it might cause. Right. Is probably more important than the art you'll bring in. But can you consider, hey, people don't want things in the sanctuary. That might be fine. Can we have some stuff in the fellowship space? Yeah. Or, hey, we don't want actual images of people. That's great. Can we have more abstract art? Or depictions of events without people? Right. Or some people will say, hey, people are okay, but not Jesus. Okay. There's plenty of stories that I can perhaps depict that don't have Jesus. Or, like I'm pretty much landed on, use Jesus, don't use the Father or the Spirit. Yeah. And we put those in. I think in some sense, there's less of a necessity than was in the medieval church, because today most people are literate.
Right.
Right? So I did not first learn about Abraham and Isaac through a painting.
Right.
Because I had read the story.
Yeah.
Whether it was through the actual text or through a children's book.
Yeah.
I knew that story before I saw that painting.
Yeah.
So that it's less necessary in that way because people have the way to communicate with others or explore on their own the text of the Bible, because now we have literacy, we have printing presses. Most people have a Bible. If you want to read a Bible story, Google what chapter it's in and just go to town.
Yeah.
So it's maybe less necessary for the sake of that instruction. I do think it holds a lot of value still for children who are by nature illiterate. Right. Right. We between us have 3 kids. None of our kids can read.
Nope.
It's because the oldest one is 3.
But Arthur loves to flap a book back and forth, man.
But all 3 of them can look at pictures.
Yep.
And at least for the ones that are at least slightly older, have some understanding of what's going on. So Jamie can look through his Bible and it's got pictures, and he's like, I want one with the boat. All right, Noah's Ark, Jonah, whatever. And they can learn through these pictures. That's why even in churches that have very little art, they're gonna have some flannel graphs or something in their children in their children's instruction, because that's useful for teaching children. So the instructive side, is maybe less necessary in modern churches, just because the reality of the dissemination of the Bible, now that we have the printing press, everyone has it. Well, not everyone. Most people have it. Right. Most people have it in their own language. Yeah. Most people can read it. There is still a very, I think, good value on saying, this is something that's beautiful. This is a person's, in many ways, act of worship in this depiction of this event or this thing. And therefore, we can use it. And it still serves as that point of discussion, not for discussing this story happened, but for discussing, hey, have you ever considered that in this moment, Abraham was experienced a lot of grief or anger? Is he angry at God? Is he angry at himself?
Yeah. I would say one of the more striking moments I've had in a sanctuary was when I was touring Nashotah House Seminary, when I thought I was going to leap into seminary right after undergrad. And they have, it's a smaller chapel that they have, but it's separated out like classic chapels would be. So all the students are in the front of, I don't remember what it's called, the gate or whatnot. Yeah. And then anybody who was visiting was at the back. But the gate had on top of it a crucifix. And I ended up just in the perfect spot where the depiction of Christ on the cross was looking just directly at me. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And of course, I'd seen many depictions of Christ on the cross, but there was just something about the image of him on the cross looking directly at me with the pain and anguish he was going through, but also just the willingness or for the joy set before him enduring, like it just hit me in a way that like, oh, that piece of art hit me at the right spot in that place of worship.
And it's just the reality of like, hey, a different medium is inherently going to strike you differently than the written word. And again, the written word is the true word. It's the thing that we can't violate. And it's the thing we need to measure the other things by.
Absolutely.
But we still can look at things and say, hey, let's consider this emotion, this idea that's, was the angel grabbing Abraham's hand, or was it, all these things that just help us think more deeply about the stories as we try to understand them. Yeah. I mean, I've been looking at most of this kind of painting.
Oh yeah, because you haven't really been in my office a whole lot.
I haven't. From Hunchback, right? Yeah. And at least in the musical version, so this is a modern version of a older book.
A better version.
I'm not talking about the movie. I'm talking about the musical as a modern version of a book that was written by a guy who at least pretended to be an agnostic. I'm not certain Victor Hugo wasn't a closeted Christian.
Yeah. He at least was wrestling with some stuff.
Yeah. With a lot of his stuff, you're like, for a guy who was like avowedly an agnostic, he sure writes a lot of like characters who really struggle with real issues of faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, in the musical version, it is the saints who convict how am I forgetting his name? Frollo to not cast away the child. You know, in the Disney version, it's the priest who says, you can't do that.
Right.
But in the movie version, there's no one around. It's the conviction of these depictions of the saints looking down at him that gets him to kind of realize, I can't kill a kid.
Well, something really interesting when I did that show
Yeah.
as Quasimodo was thinking about what would it be like to live only in a cathedral, hearing mass almost every day.
Yeah.
Being just bathed in this beauty where that just becomes your lifeblood. And Victor Hugo wrote the book a lot because of his love for the cathedral and wanting to save the cathedral. And it was just very interesting thinking about the ways in which if this beautiful thing is made rightly, where it's all really artfully and faithfully depicting the truth of the Christian faith, that can shape you in some deep and profound ways. And so a lot of like the gargoyles became part of that to me, of like he's processing and thinking through everything in that way. And so if that is where we worship, and whether it be in the worship space or in the lobby, like you've said, or we have a prayer space or something that's artfully done, it does seep into us in a different way than the written word does.
Yeah.
And shapes us in a unique way.
And we didn't, you hit on it a little bit there. We didn't even discuss a form of art that is a visual medium, which is architecture.
Yeah.
The Catholic churches, especially the Middle Ages Catholic churches, were very much just designed to evoke an understanding of what they were meant to be holy places. I'm not a big fan of, like, I'll call them warehouse churches.
Yeah.
Where I've had this conversation with people at seminary and other places, and they're like, you can take any place and make it a church. I'm like, you can't. 100%. The church is the gathered people and not the building.
Yeah.
If you have the opportunity,
yes,
the space you have as a church should be thought through. And a space that has beauty in its architecture. And if you look at a lot of these cathedrals, most of them, almost all cathedrals you look at, especially Middle Ages and Renaissance cathedrals, have incredibly high ceilings, right? The ceiling might be 100 feet tall or 40 feet tall. Yeah. They're incredibly high. This is not an accident. These are not like, hey, this look good. It is meant to be this idea that you're entering into a higher space. And these vaulted ceilings are meant to kind of portray heavens above you.
Yeah.
In a space that like your home does not. So if we have this opportunity in the church, I do think it is valuable to think through your architecture and think through your space and think through things like, hey, is your baptismal up front or in the back? And why? Do you have a crucifix? Is it in the center of the pulpit or is it to the side, and why? And whether you make decisions on either side of this.
Right. Just knowing why you're doing it.
Yeah, having thought through the instructive value of your space is a huge thing. This is why, as an aside, this is a pastorally advice for anyone who's out there. Please don't put flags on your stage. Please don't. It was a thing back in like, I don't know, the 70s and 80s and 90s. Not a lot of churches do it now anyways. But when I see it, I'm like, listen, I'm glad you're an American. Whatever, I don't care. And the Christian flag, if you want to use that. Take them up. First, they look terrible.
They do.
Flags are for outside. Because they're never going to have wind inside, so they're always going to hang limp. But also, if we have, especially an American flag, if we have an American flag on our stage in a sanctuary, it very much shows we have an allegiance to the state that is at least similar to our allegiance to Christ, which shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a lot of this I've said, like, hey, this depends on your body and all this stuff. If you have churches, I'm gonna look at the camera for this one. If you have flags on your sanctuary, please remove them.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Not because it says something about your priorities, what you place up there.
100%.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Well, great conversation.
I did have one more thought. You might have to edit this back in.
No, throw it back in.
Because I thought I was going to, I mentioned it briefly.
Yeah.
So the Latin Mass became a big thing.
Oh, yes, we didn't talk about the Latin Mass at all.
If anyone listening doesn't know what the Latin Mass was, Rome became the dominant and most important church in the Catholic Church, and the Bishop of Rome became the Pope.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of things. Over time, it became popular to teach the Mass in Latin. And for a while, that made sense because it was the dominant language of the culture. As that died away, it stayed prominent to teach in Latin, even if the culture you were in did not speak Latin.
Yep.
So this is post-medieval into the Renaissance. It's actually a little bit post-Reformation. There was a period of time where the Pope mandated Latin Mass, where they said all Mass everywhere in the world should be taught in Latin. And that reversed course in 1962, where they totally flipped course and basically said all Mass should be taught in the language of the people, the vernacular language. And many popes since have actually made that even stronger, and basically nowadays the Latin Mass is almost banned. But for a period of about 400 years, they were normally teaching the church in Latin to people who did not know any Latin.
Which is crazy because part of the richness of a liturgy, and the liturgy that's been handed down through the church that has changed somewhat, but there's a lot of historical foundation, is the thought of how does this instruct us and shape our lives around that by what we're hearing and saying. And
again, the order of the liturgy as well. But yeah, this became a huge thing, and this made art arguably even more important.
Yeah.
Because now, if I'm an illiterate person, maybe thankfully this happened post-Renaissance and post-Protestant Reformation.
Right.
So if you wanted to get a Bible in your own language, you maybe could.
Right.
But if you were a Catholic who wasn't literate or didn't have a Bible in your own language and didn't speak Latin, you essentially didn't get instruction.
Yeah. Because you've lost
at least not in the Mass.
Right.
You could talk to your priest maybe outside and he'd explain it in the common language.
Right.
But this made the art even more important because this is maybe the only avenue you have to hear these Bible stories.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because if you don't speak Latin, even if he's telling you about the Israelites crossing the Red Sea in Latin.
Did they read the scriptures in Latin too?
I believe so.
Okay.
I'm not 100% certain on that, but I believe so.
That's crazy.
I mean, Latin was the primary language of the church for so long.
Right.
And even church translations. And again, for a while it made sense, right? In Rome and post-Roman eras, they spoke Latin. So they were doing it in the vernacular language.
Yeah.
But because of a lot of reasons, it stuck around.
Right.
And maybe because that's the language they translated the Bible to.
Right.
So we do everything in the language of the Bible, even though it's not the original language of the Bible.
Yeah.
The
OG King James only.
Yeah, right. Maybe that's why it sticks around. But yeah, for a while there, it was. Yeah. And the Latin Mass had started before that. So you might be a person in southern France who only speaks French. And every Sunday you go to a church where they speak Latin and you legitimately don't know what they're saying.
Yeah.
And now the art becomes your only avenue to understand most of these things. So yeah. That you'll maybe have to edit that back into where it makes some more sense. Good. But yeah.
That's good. Cool. So if there's anybody that wants to learn more about the medieval church or about what this relationship to art was there, are there any resources you'd recommend for people?
One book, it covers a lot of church history in general, is called Church History in Plain Language by Bruce Shelley. I think they actually just made a 5th edition of the book.
Nice.
Bruce Shelley's passed away, but his, I think, daughter edited it with a bunch of people and added some sections.
Nice.
It is very much in plain language.
Cool.
I read it in seminary, so it in some ways is a scholarly source,
right?
But it is very readable,
it's very accessible,
and very accessible. And I think, frankly, he does a really good job of just making it pretty interesting.
Nice.
And he goes the way that book works. So if you just want to read about the medieval period, he kind of breaks the books up into like era. So it's like the early church, and then the kind of Roman church, and then you'd have so he breaks it up into era. So if you just want the one, you could read the chapter on the medieval church.
Yeah,
get that. Books on art, most of mine I've found are either more like articles, like shorter articles. There's one by John Piper. There's a number actually about the Wesleyan Church. A lot of them are like doctoral theses.
Sure.
So you can look that up. I don't know. There's a lot of books about kind of a theology of art in general.
Right.
Or general overview of looking at art history, especially from the Catholic side of things. There's not many I know of, and not any I've read, that are specifically about the church art in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
So
Cool. Well, if somebody wants to pursue a doctoral thesis on that and then turn it into a book and
which
make
does
it accessible
happen.
for people,
Yeah.
go for it. Do it. This is your
Yeah,
call.
if you want to get real scholarly and then back off and make it popular,
Yep.
well, thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, John.
My pleasure.
Great.